we're just really blessed. And as a speaker, what's really delicious for the presenter is the ground is laid for the talk in the music. Dan just gave my message. We could take the offering and go home. Except for one little detail. When a minister has the microphone, buckle up. We're in for a ride, folks. I want to take you on a little stroll down memory lane. Some of you remember when I came as an intern, back in 2009. And part of my training here was to improve my speaking skill. Now, I came with some skill set. I'd been doing public speaking since I was 12 years old. And in high school, I placed second in a statewide competition. Woo! Woo! But I had little experience and no formal training in homiletics. That very unique speaking style that is the art of preaching. And so when I arrived here, Reverend Sky St. John formed a homiletics training session every week. And the people who were in that class together were Reverend Levitt Thomas, Reverend Mindy Tucker, and myself. And what I very quickly learned is while I came with some skill set, I also came with a whole bag of tricks that Sky called bad habits. We all had them. Mindy would do this all the time. Levitt had the Thomas hammer. Because he talks with zelosity and emphasis, you know. And me, I was always nervous, and I had to bleed off all the energy that I didn't want you to know that I had going on in here and here. And while I worked, I just moved constantly. I never landed anywhere. And I heard about it every single week in homiletics. Then when I came back as a full-time staff member, one Christmas season, Sky said, "You, come join us for rehearsal. You're going to be in Zamar. Alethea needs another female voice." Now, what Alethea needed, and my apologies to Alethea Train if she's watching, is she needed a voice that could sing harmony. What she got was a semi-reliable soprano who couldn't stick with the harmony line because there was Sky and I was following him on the melody. Those two stories talk to us about the problem of unlearning what we already have as part of ourselves. So I spent weeks in homiletics learning to stand absolutely still. And if I lost a train of thought, or I wondered, what's that thing I intended to say next? It wasn't found on the floor, which is the normal thing we humans do, is when we're in pause, we might look down. No. The answer I need, the thing I'm trying to remember, the thing I want, that's the connecting statement, it's on your forehead. So I'm going to remember to keep eye contact with my audience, no matter what channel is trying to distract me in my brain, or I can't remember the thing I was going to say next, or the bridge from this slide to the next one is swimming somewhere momentarily lost. It's not on the floor, it's on your forehead. Now, there is actually photo evidence that I was really in Zamar for a while. Yeah. And finally, we recognized that it was too much work for me to try and sing the harmony, and I had too much to unlearn every week because I would practice incorrectly. Because I'd hear part of that harmony line and then I'd fall into melody. And I couldn't lay down the right track with ease. I did eventually overcome some of my poor habits in speaking because I got lots of reminders. My habit of moving all the time, for Sky, who defined himself as a guy who had a desire for heavenly dancing, meaning he was ADHD, all of our collective repetitive movements drove him nuts. And so we hear about it all the time. My earrings would have driven him nuts today too, but fashion wins. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Ralph. So, what we need to put our attention on in life is often not the learning process, but the unlearning process. To let go of those belief systems, those ideas in our head, the patterns of some activity that aren't working for us. Whether it's an idea that's holding us back in some way, preventing us from living fully as the Christ self that we are. Or it's some behavior simply as a speaking or singing pattern that you want to unhook to improve your skill level as you move in that arena of life. Whatever it is, it's a process of letting go. Now, Sky and Alethea both would say it took 7 to 10 times as much energy to undo the pattern that wasn't working as it took to learn it in the first place. I don't have time to go back 10 times equivalent. And yet, isn't that our life journey? When we step onto the spiritual path and desire to live more fully as the God self that we are and have our life function fully, vibrantly, joyfully, don't we have to unlearn a whole lot of stuff that's rattling around in our brain? Yeah. Well, we have an even more deliberate authority than Sky and Alethea to tell us how much energy it takes and the value of that relearning process. We can turn to Romans in Scripture, chapter 12, verse 2, which tells us, do not allow this world to mold you in its own image. Don't get caught up in this stuff out here. Instead, be transformed from the inside out by renewing your mind. And that process of renewing begins by rooting out the stuff that's not working for us and planting seeds of that which we would prefer to have experience in our life, to manifest for our well-being. Now, I love it when science and spirituality intersect. And more in this age that we live in, that's the experience we're seeing. And this particular principle of letting go of what doesn't serve to create space for that which we would prefer or desire instead is reflected in science in a relatively new neurotechnology called neuroplasticity. One of the major voices in this arena is a psychiatrist named Jeffrey Schwartz, who's part of the UCLA neuroscience team, a researcher. And he's discovered a technique to unhook the unuseful thoughts held in your mind, the alarming thought patterns that can just be spinning around and causing distress, and recreate, to choose, literally choose a new experience in your life. Now, he's created a 4-step process, and it begins with the idea of relabel. First, you got to recognize and know that that thing that's spinning around in your mind, that debilitating idea, is a false idea. You made it up, likely in reaction to some emotional response, some emotional experience, and now it's stuck there. Because we learn it quickly, but it can be work to let it go. So first, we simply identify that there's that false idea. Oh, we don't struggle with it. Oh, there it is. I'm having that thought again. I know that's not helpful to me. I'm going to choose something different. And the next thing is to reattribute it, to separate ourselves from it, to detach that idea from the true self. And since he was designing this and doing this work with OCD patients, their rallying cry became, "It's not me, it's my OCD." Which shifted a little bit to the spiritual arena in which we work. We might call that an effective spiritual denial, a statement of what is not true and that which we will not give power in our lives. It's not me. It's my whatever. And then he asks us to refocus, which is the process of installing that new pattern, the relearning of that which we want. And it does take more energy to shift into a new paradigm than to stay in that place where we have been. So we need to apply lots of energy and effort in this particular aspect in order to make the process successful. So in Unity, what do? We use statements of truth, positive affirmations, and we flood our consciousness with that new information so that it overtakes and pushes out the thought that does not serve, the idea or the belief system that we no longer choose to have be part of who we are. And then Dr. Schwartz's fourth step is to revalue. The realization that this idea, this belief system, it has no power. It may still be lurking in the back of our mind, but when it shows up, we say, no, thank you. I am done with this idea. Nuh-uh. That pattern, I'm not going down that road again. I have a whole new track, and this is what it is. And we reinforce that new idea, that new desire. Now, in Unity, we have a system that's very similar, but we have different language about it. We don't talk about repatterning OCD habits. We talk about enlivening and expanding our Christ consciousness. And we have a simple system that also helps us to focus on that redesign of our life. And in Unity, we call it the 12 powers. It's 12 because it's a metaphysical number and is represented by the apostles. It's 12 because Mr. Fillmore, our co-founder, received this information inspired by guidance of spirit and created a deeper understanding of our own true nature and the qualities that we possess that are really the image and likeness that we are, that God is. So when we expand these various qualities, they include faith, strength, will, understanding, and more. When we expand these qualities, we really begin to be that Christed nature that we all desire. That's why we're here in community, to support one another in the journey of learning to be more God-expressing in the world. And 12 powers is one way in Unity that we have as a tool set in order to reach that goal. Now, there are many processes. There's denials, the letting go statement, and the laying down of the new pattern with the positive affirmation. We do simple things. Each of the powers are represented by a color. And so you'll notice that all of the staff here on Sundays wear some color that's, unifying. And it's representative of that particular power. This month, the power is elimination, the release, the let go, the denial. And its representative color is russet. Do you know how hard it is to find russet in fabric, people? But there it was, a beautiful Hawaiian textile print in russet. And when we wear that color, it's simply something representative on the outside that invites us to be conscious of the transformation we desire on the inside. Because we're talking about consciousness. These powers operate in us, in our consciousness, to help us be more of who we came here to be. To help us be more expressing God as we live our life. Now, it's really very simple. The 12 powers are a whole, a collective of an assortment of tools. But we tend to what we're after is achieving the overall goal, which is the Christ nature, which combines the expression of all of those powers. Now, this beautiful sunset behind me, I want to attribute to its photographer, Lisa Ensley, our church administrator here, steward of church administration. Lisa is the skilled photographic eye that captured this magnificent sunset here in Hawaii. And when we look at it, don't we just feel a sense of awe that nature is filled with such beauty, such magnificent color, and it lasts maybe for a moment, to be captured so that we can appreciate it, whether in photography, or maybe there's an artist in the room who paints. If you're a painter and you had this photograph or saw this scene and you wanted to render it on canvas, you would begin to analyze its parts. You would be visually pulling this scene apart in your mind and saying, well, they're reds, various shades of reds, and they're golds and purples, and oddly, there might even be some blue in there. And I bet I'd have my black tube out so that I can create a richer, deeper contrast when I paint these magnificent, rich colors. We look at the individual colors in the palette and determine how they can best be used to create the whole, which is our spiritual journey. What are the tools? What are the qualities in us that we want to expand and express more fully so we bring more of God into the world, into our own lives? Because that energy of God is the overall goal, is the sunset. The energy of God alive in us is our own individual masterpiece. Now, the process I've alluded to begins with elimination, the power of the month, also called renunciation or denial or release. Reverend Phil Pearson, in his book, The 12 Freedoms, defines it. Elimination is our mind's ability to erase these thoughts from having any place in our consciousness. That's important. Our consciousness is where transformation begins. Everything that exists out in the world first began as an idea you held in mind, or we collectively held in mind, in consciousness. So what we wish to experience has to first be nurtured and developed in consciousness. So we weed out that stuff that ain't working so well, folks. What's the not true idea in your life that you would just love to take that little garden shovel, that little trowel, and dig it right out and throw it over your shoulder? Whatever that idea is, affirm for yourself, remind yourself that it has no power over you. It has no power to shape my life. And we need to have some authority under that. A lot of Reverend Sky's homiletics teaching was about the ability to stand fully present with a sense of spiritual authority. Because, folks, I got to tell you, public speaking is one thing, but standing here in front of y'all and claiming that I have the ability to teach you some spiritual truth when I'm still living the journey myself, ooh, that takes some standing in truth. That takes knowing that whatever I think are my limiting ideas, I also have the capacity to be in the process of change in every moment. And so I know the journey. Maybe, just maybe, I'm one step ahead. Or maybe you're the one that's ahead and I'm following you. Because as Reverend Sky was fond of reminding us, we are all ministers. We are all students. We are all teachers. The journey is one that we move through together. So we eliminate what's no longer working for us so that we can make room for what we desire instead. And that process takes us to the power of life, which is the power, fortunately for my talk, shows up in December next month. And that power is of life. It's easy to think it would be the physical activity of living, of our bodies, of the energy that drives our bodies. But it's really the foundation for that experience and activity of our humanness. It's our consciousness. For that's the seed of everything. It's where everything begins. And so here is where we plant what we desire instead, what we choose to experience rather than what we might be having right now. It's the thing we're going to flood into our minds so that our brain becomes rewired with a new neural path, a new way of being. I could actually sing harmony, Ralph. Danny, what do you think? Can I try out? Yeah. We'll forego that one. But it's a good thought. I'll put my energy to other things at this moment in my life. And what we're really here to practice is not only the idea of giving new information a presence in our consciousness, but this journey for all of us is about practicing the presence of God. The awareness of the truth of who we are, represented by all of these 12 powers. The nature that is God, that is alive in us, waiting to be expanded, fully formed, expressed out into the world, showing up wherever it's needed for your life and for others as that sweet spirit, that deep wisdom, guided by an inner voice of subtle truth that speaks to each of us. And it's much more available when we practice this presence, when we practice releasing the old stuff, and we practice planting new seed, creating new pathways of being. So when we practice the presence, we bring ourselves more fully and vibrantly and joyfully alive. Alive in a state of wholeness, well-being, abundance, reconciled relationships, healthy bodies. When we live in the practice of the presence of God, when we make that practice permanent through meditation and prayer, through affirmations, then we have created the masterpiece of our own lives. We have used the full palette to become an absolute work of art ourselves. And I can see you itching to go home and pull out that paint box. To put the spiritual tools to work daily so that your practice of God becomes permanent in your life. I look forward to enjoying your masterpiece unfolding in front of all of us. Aloha.